Good evening, whakaalawhalahiatu, and welcome to tonight's bulletin of BCN News. Leading the news tonight, the Premier Honourable Dalton Tangilangi has apparently created history by introducing a motion before the final sitting of the Whanokepule today, calling on constitutional reforms. The motion was received with support by the Whanokepule. Here's more on that story. The motion asked that the Whanokepule, as a matter of priority, to call on the Constitution Review Committee as soon as possible after the New Year break to begin the process of reviewing the Niue Constitution by holding public consultations and to report to the House on recommendations for amendment.
It's a weird feeling that a leader put a motion in the House, but I think if anything I'm reminding my colleagues in the House our obligations as elected members of the House and lawmakers, that some of the things within the Constitution that we always talk about that needs to be amended, especially to meet the modern day that we're in. Some of those, as you know, we have moved on from the analog into the digital world, and as I said on my maiden speech as a leader, that I would like to accelerate Niue position in the world. So we are not anymore a shadow of our partners or anyone else. We have voting rights in the world and big organizations and the like, and we need to be recognized. And I think that would only happen if we change such as the leader from the Premier into the Prime Minister title. And so as the expansion of Cabinet, probably another one or two ministers. So this brought all these together, and we need to move with this because it's not an easy process. There's 15 steps within the flowchart of the legal framework that we have to go through.
Veteran politician Olaf Jacobson says that in her more than 30 years in the House, this is the first time that a sitting Premier has put forth a motion before the Whanokepule. She, though, recognises the urgency of the undertaking given the times that we live in. She supported the motion. Premier Tangilangi says that he wants the people to be involved and engaged in this process of national consultations on the review of the Constitution.
You know, every year that election year, or when elections happen, you know, they always talk about the law, they always talk about changing, and this is their time to be part of those changes within the Constitution, and it's critical that, so when the committee members call a meeting in your village, please attend, because that's the only way of being heard, or before we pass anything, at least we know that you are part of that, not so much contributing, but you are part of the process that makes things happen. We don't just change this for the sake of changing it. We're changing it because of the time that we're in now, and how we're going to move forward, and how it can benefit our up-and-coming generation into the future. So that is the key to some of the changes that we all would like to do at the moment.
The last amendment of the new Constitution was in 1993 when the Public Service Commission was relocated from Wellington to Niue. And Sir Robert's Wharf in central Alofi remains closed, so work to repair structural damages due to Tropical Cyclone Zac earlier this week can be completed so that the port can be operational as soon as possible. Here's our student reporter Georgia Tuhipa with more.
According to a press release from the Department of Transport yesterday, the immediate priority is to ensure the cargo boat Island Chief is able to offload cargo. BCN News earlier this week received confirmation from Matson's head office in Hawaii that the Island Chief was expected to depart Samoa on Monday night with the intention for the vessel to arrive Niue on Thursday today. Matson's, though, says that this is all dependent on the weather and conditions that may affect stevedoring operations in Niue. Georgia Tuhipa for BCN News.
Telecom Niue came under heavy scrutiny at the last sitting of the Whanoi Kepule today. Common Role member Richard Hipa probed for answers to some of the questions on operational delays and procurement practices of the largest state-owned enterprise on the island. Hipa probed about the operations of the state-owned enterprise, including the reasons for the delays on the execution of the Manatua cable, which has been postponed again until the end of January next year. Premier Tangilangi, in response, said that the delays to the Manatua cable is due to the multi-country deal with which this venture was initiated. He also introduced the Telecom Board of Directors, which is still being chaired by Avi Rubin, and the other old member of the board, Ian Fitzgerald, who is based in New Zealand. The two new members of the board, approved by Cabinet last week, is lawyer Sinhamana Heko and IT businessman Desio Sioniholo. Another question posed by Hipa to the Premier as to who will pay for the $39,000 fumigation and cleaning of a ditch witch heavy machinery purchased by Telecom Niue earlier this year. Richard Hipa also continued to probe on the procurement process or the tender process of Telecom Niue and how they are able to purchase multiple vehicles, including a fleet of pickup trucks and heavy machineries such as a high-up truck and a ditch witch digger. The Premier was not able to provide the answers to these questions, and he asked that he be given some time to present the response. In this next segment of our news, we take a look at a few personal recordings of how Tropical Cyclone Zac was felt at different parts of the island on Tuesday morning. Here's Georgia telling the story of those recordings from the different villages around the island.
We start with Mutala recording by Frank Sioniholo of Uluvehi on Tuesday morning, clearly showing rough seas and very strong winds. Moving down to Tuapa, this is a recording taken by Felicia Talangi from their backyard at Tavahihi, taken just after 7 a.m. on Tuesday. And in Alofi, Margaret Siosikefu filmed this from Vaialama Cafe at 9:30 that morning. Moving down to Amano, this recording by Claudia Viliamu of her workplace taken just before 7 a.m. Higher up on the top road to Tamakotonga, we have a footage from Andrea Talangi at Laloai Toa area at the same time. At the southern end of the island at Avasele was taken at Fuahu. The fruit trees like the vi, pawpaws, and the breadfruits lost many fruits from this property. Then on the east coast of Hakupu, this recording from Brad Ikinepule of some wind damage to family property. So that's how Cyclone Zac was felt in different parts of the island. 2 days later, today, our cameras recorded the evidence of salt spray around the coastal areas when the waves were as high as 8 to 9 meters in some areas such as the Aliluki Park area, where the residents were all evacuated on Tuesday morning, prompting the yellow alert. Most of the western coastline looks like this with salt spray damage. Georgia Tuhipa for BCN News.
And continuing with our looking back at some of our top stories for the first half of the year, tonight we look back to March when COVID-19 was declared a global pandemic by the World Health Organization and travel restrictions became the new normal. BCN covered a number of COVID-19 stories this year. Here is one of those stories.
There are no reported, suspected or confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Niue or in any Pacific Island country. However, a local Niuean who is in Asia is currently undergoing a period of self-isolation while in Auckland. Niue's health department confirms that a local Niue resident who was in Japan on training is in Auckland for 14 days as a precaution before returning home to Niue. The department thanks the resident for agreeing to undertake this period of self-isolation on a voluntary basis. A range of preparedness activities have also been highlighted by the health department. This includes a proposal for an updated travel restriction will be tabled in cabinet this week, in view of the growing spread of COVID-19 cases in countries outside of China. A multi-sectoral team consisting of personnel from key government agencies will continue to meet regularly to discuss and address actions needed from these agencies. The Niue pandemic plan for COVID-19 is under review by the New Zealand Ministry of Health. A team from WHO will arrive on the 6th of March to carry out refresher training on infection prevention and control and other matters for health staff and border control staff. The health department has received further stock of masks, sanitizers and personal protective equipment. Thanks to the Government of New Zealand, the health department has also received 10 non-contact thermometers, which enables health staff to screen passengers of interest on arrival. A community outreach program will be initiated and public health messaging campaign will be strengthened. The health department is in touch with the WHO on a weekly basis via teleconference and with the New Zealand Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs on a regular basis. Information and experiences are also being shared and between heads of health in the Pacific. Thanks to the New Zealand High Commissioner and his team, the Health Department receives daily situation reports from the New Zealand Ministry of Health, which helps guide decision-making in Niue.
And 9 months later, Niue remains COVID-free and travel restrictions remain the same. Only 26 passengers are allowed into Niue every 2 weeks, and only Niueans and essential workers, such as major project staff, are allowed into the country. As of this week, Niue and New Zealand have begun processes to allow for one-way quarantine-free travel for Niueans wanting to visit New Zealand. According to Premier Tangilangi today, this one-way quarantine-free travel may begin as early as next month or February. So that's looking back at one of our top stories this year. We'll continue with more of those series next week. But to end our news bulletin tonight, thankfully there were no injuries recorded as a result of Tropical Cyclone Zac this week, according to the police and the Niue Hospital. But as records go, we have 3 newborn babies born this week, adding to our records on the population count. The Niue medical team were on standby to deal with any emergencies and injuries from the Tropical Cyclone Zac, but instead they were kept busy delivering babies. So while the rest of us were bracing for Tropical Cyclone Zac, one baby boy chose that day to enter this world. And on the following day, yesterday, another baby boy and a baby girl were born. Congratulations to the families and to the hardworking team at Niue Hospital. Congratulations to the families on the new addition to your mangawhaua. But that's our news for tonight. You have a wonderful weekend. We'll be back with you on Monday for our bulletin in Wangahau Niue. Until then, good night.